I wanted to talk a little bit about who we are for Master Gardeners. We are associated with the Ohio State University. That's who does all of our training. I have been a Master Gardener from the time I retired in 2008. So I'm one of the old hands anymore. If you need to get in touch with us, that's all of the information. There is a hotline, which I believe is still active. It's usually done by October, but because of the weather and everything else, they've stayed open, and so they're still answering questions. But even still, anytime you call, you leave a message, people get back to you within 24 to 48 hours. So it's a great service. It's one of the main things we do. And so that's the rest of the information about us. Now, what are we going to talk about? Well, we're going to talk about what a houseplant is and what it isn't, how to take care of them, and talk a little bit about bringing new plants into your home and giving them a home, and a little bit about potting up. So, what is a houseplant? Well, it's anything that you've brought inside your house, basically, because they were never, well, now we breed them to be houseplants, but they were never ever meant to be houseplants. They were outside, and somebody said, you know, that would look good on my kitchen table. And so they found something to put it in, and they put it in on their kitchen table. They've simply been brought in from their natural habitat inside. And so what does that mean? It means we've got to figure out how to provide for them the way they were naturally provided for. And so that's the whole thing about caring for houseplants. And as you can see, any of our houseplants came from almost any kind of environment, from cool mountaintops to dry deserts, wet, dry, hot, cold. We've decided that we want them inside. Poinsettias is one of the major ones that I think of when I think about bringing them in, because they're native to Mexico and they grow to be as big as trees. And somebody just said, you know, this would be a neat thing to have as a houseplant and have it in around Christmas time. And so someone by the name of, believe it or not, Poinsettia, did do that. And since then, we've been breeding them so that we can have them in a variety of colors and sizes and the like. But that's the problem with houseplants, is we have to try and mimic their home environment. Now, how many of you have had an occasion to get one of those planter things with all sorts of plants in it? Everybody's gotten one of those, I'm sure. Trouble is, florists look at what will look good together, not what will grow well together. And so the best advice, if you get one of those things, is to pull it apart and give them each their own little home, because it may look pretty together. But I was given one, actually I gave a talk in this same room years ago and was given a planter, and it was beautiful. Oh, it was gorgeous. Trouble is, they were all succulents except for one. The place they bought it from watered it for the one. All of the succulents just rotted out on me. And so I have my spider plant, which is the only thing that was not a succulent, but it was the spiky thing in the middle. And so I lost the entire planter because it was planted because of how it looked good together, not how it would survive together. We want to think about holistic care. That just means the entire environment, not just the light, not just the water, not just the temperature. We want to think about everything. So it's all the way from the soil all the way down to the rate of growth. You need to understand your plant, in other words, before you have any chance of having it flourish in your home. So in terms of water, when and how often do you water? Okay, you feel the soil. Okay, anyone else? Okay. In other words, you all know what you're doing because you're watering it when the plant needs it. Okay. Well, some people do all their plants once a week. They walk around with their watering can and they water all their plants, whether they need it or not. It's just that's what they do on Wednesday mornings. Well, some people just wait until they droop. There was a fellow who called the helpline. He said, I don't understand it. All of my hanging baskets outside aren't surviving. Well, when do you water them? When they droop. No, no, that's already too late when they droop. The other good answer is when I remember to. But here's the best one is when the soil is dry, because that's when the plant needs it. And some planters will dry out sooner than others, so you have to be careful. Water is, in fact, the #1 houseplant killer. It's sometimes you water too often, sometimes you water too infrequently. So the general recommendations are when the potting soil is well drained and right for the plant, and water when the top 2 inches are dry. The bottom is still going to be moist, so you've got a chance. So what you're going to do is you're going to water to kind of top up the water, if you will. But there are some plants that should be kept almost nearly dry all the time. A lot of your succulents and cacti are that way. And some you want to keep constantly moist. African violets hate to have their feet wet, but they don't like to dry out either. So they're a touchy one. Orchids can dry out, but if they dry out too much, you'll never get their leaves back to the condition they need to be in. So there's a whole lot of learning that goes into taking care of a specific plant. I water mostly top down, but bottom up also works, especially if you have let something dry out too much. If you put it in a bucket of water, allow it to take up as much as it wants, and then let it drain out. Those are my orchids in my bathtub because that's how I water them. They mostly are in the same size pots. They have the same kinds of water needs. And so I just put them in the bathtub and I take my handheld and I water them, let them drain out, and then they're good to go. But with orchids or with anything else, you need to make sure you don't do it too often. You'll rot the roots, or not enough, and your leaves will start to go funny on you. Okay, light is absolutely essential for photosynthesis. That's how plants make their food. And again, you need to know your plant's needs. I don't know if you hold on to that tag that comes with the plant, because that tells you what your plant needs. And it's a very good guide for both light and water and all of the other needs. If you know that you've got something that needs high light, you can figure it out by putting your hand over a white sheet of paper. And if you get a real shadow, that means you've got high light. If you've got no shadow, then you've got low light. And anywhere in between gives you a range. So if your plant says diffuse light, then you're going to want something with a fuzzy shadow when you put your hand over the paper. And all the tags that come with your plants are very, very important and full of all sorts of information, because it will tell you those things, like when you need to water and what kind of light it needs. Plants with variegated leaves, some of your philodendrons, some of your spider plant, for example, some of the others, they have less chlorophyll in their leaves, because the only part of their leaf that has chlorophyll that is capable of making the food is the green part. The white part has no chlorophyll, so they need extra light. And sometimes you almost always need to rotate your plants when you've got them near a light source. Otherwise, they'll start to grow towards it and become leggy, but it also means that if they require the light, only half the plant is getting it, if it's in a window, for example. If you have too much light, the tips tend to curl up or turn brown on you. You'll get brown and yellow spots. They'll wilt, even though it's not, and you might think it's because they haven't got enough water and you water them again, but that's not the case. It could be because they don't have enough light. And if the green is apt to fade if it doesn't get enough light. Too little, we talk about leggy plants because they're growing to the light. The leaves are going to be smaller, the newer ones coming in. Have you ever had a plant, you brought it home and all of a sudden you look down and the buds are all around in the saucer underneath your plant? That's called bud drop. It can be because of a shift from where it came from and where it went to. It could be because of the light source. It could be that whoever was taking care of your lovely plant before you got it wasn't taking care of it well. And without enough light, you may get fewer flowers or no flowers. There are some plants that in order to bloom, they need to have light. And so you have to be very, very careful. And interesting enough, if you don't have enough light for a variegated plant, they may turn all green on you because they need the green for the chlorophyll for the food. And so if they aren't getting it, because they're not getting enough light, they'll make as much green as they can. And so you'll end up having this beautiful variegated plant turn all green on you, and you'll wonder why. Well, it's because it's not getting enough light. Okay, south-facing windows are going to be the most intense because they're going to get the strong west throughout the height of the day to the eastern light. East and west get 2/3 less light than the south-facing ones, and north-facing virtually get no light because the sun goes around behind your house if you're facing towards the north. And you have to take into account if you've got a blind in front of your plant, it's not going to get the light you think it's getting because it's being diffused. Also, if you have walls like this color are good because they're kind of a neutral. They're not going to absorb light. They're not going to reflect light. But if you have dark walls, that's going to absorb the light. And if you have light like white or beige, they're going to start reflecting. So in fact, you're going to get more light on your plants if you've got light walls because the sun is going to bounce off of those walls. Temperature. Well, most plants like it the way I like it. 70 to 80, well, it gets too close to 80 and I don't like it, but around 75 or so, most plants like it that way. But they do like it cooler at night. And a lot of the blooming plants like to have a cool down period so they can set their buds. So that's why they're cooler at night than ones that are just foliage plants. If you live in Northeast Ohio, which we all do, otherwise we wouldn't be here, we do have our heat on in the winter and we have our air conditioner on in the summer, and we're not necessarily giving these plants the environment they need. So you might rethink how high you've got your temp in the winter and how low you have it in the summertime. Don't ever put a plant above a heater or air conditioning vent. It produces drafts. If it's a heating vent, it's going to dry out your plants faster. If it's an air conditioning vent, it's going to chill the plant, and those are all bad things doesn't matter where your plant came from originally. And temperature extremes will create all sorts of problems, including death of your plant. So you want to keep you don't want to be going from a high of 85 to a low of 50 in a daytime. That's really extreme, but you want to be careful you're not messing around with their temperature too much. Now, humidity is obviously the moisture that's in the air. Some plants really, really need it humid. Others can do very fine with dry air. Yet again, you need to know your plant and what it requires. Because if it wants a lot of moisture and you've got a very dry home, it's not going to be happy. If, on the other hand, it wants a nice dry environment like cacti and such, if you have too much moisture in the air, it's, again, your plant is not going to thrive. These are some of the high humidity plants: ferns, begonias. Prayer plant is the green one on the right. Low humidity plants like philodendrons, and that's the mother-in-law's tongue, and some of the other plants that are listed there, like cacti and succulents. Orchids tend to like a nice, humid, moist environment. They're used to rainforests and the like, or many of them are, and so they prefer a humid environment. So how do you add humidity? Well, you can get a humidifier. You can have your plants in a kitchen where they're getting the moistness from the sink while you're doing your dishes or rinsing them off. In the bathroom where there's a shower or the like. That's good for humidity-loving plants. And if you cluster them together, now that doesn't mean pile them up together, but if you cluster them, then they tend to retain more moisture that way. Get them too close and you've got a real problem. You can put a bell jar or a cloche over to keep the moisture in. And the one thing that doesn't work is misting. We used to think, just go around and mist your plants and everything will be fine. The minute you walk away, the mist is gone, and it does the plant absolutely no good whatsoever. So what I sometimes do is take a tray of pebbles, put the plant on top of it, fill the saucer with water, and it just, the water evaporates and sends the moisture up to the plants. And that's the right-hand picture is a setup I used to have where I could have trays of pebbles and have my plants in a lovely east-facing window. The orchids just absolutely love that arrangement. Unfortunately, the stand gave up, got old. Fertilization, I once heard grower of orchids say, oh, they don't need to be fertilized because they don't get it in the wild. Well, that's a lot of bunk, because the fertilization comes from the rain that comes down that brings the nutrients that it's gotten off the leaves that are above the plant. So they do in fact get fertilized in the wild. So we need to mimic that a bit if we can. If you have slow growing plants, you need less fertilizer. Fast growing, you need more. Plants tend not to grow very much in the winter months, so they need less. In the summer months, they tend to grow more, so they're going to need more fertilizer. An old plant needs more than a young plant, and it depends on if you want to encourage growth. If you want to encourage growth, then what you're going to do is you're going to fertilize more frequently. If they're all green plants, then you're going to fertilize with something that's not all, I don't mean all green, I mean non-flowering. You're going to want to fertilize with something higher in nitrogen. If you want to encourage flowers, you're going to do more phosphorus and potassium. And during the growing season, which is pretty much, we're out of it now. So it's pretty much, say early March through late October, maybe shorten that up a bit for some of your plants. You don't want to fertilize during the winter months because that's, for one thing, plants love to go into a dormant and rest a bit. The flowering plants very rarely will bloom unless we force them. In the winter months, like we force the poinsettias and we force the Christmas cactus and we force a lot of plants so that they're when we want flowers, but that's not when they really want to bloom. And when you fertilize, one of the fellows I used to know who did raise orchids, not the one who said they didn't need fertilizer. This was one who knew what he was talking about. He always said water weekly, or fertilize weekly. So in other words, whenever you do water, you're going to fertilize, but you're going to fertilize with half the strength that you ordinarily would. And that's so that the plant roots don't get burned by too intense fertilization. And they'll get what they need. If you get a new plant or you propagated a new plant or whatever, give it a whole month before you give it any fertilization at all, because it needs to become acclimatized to its pot, and its roots are very, very tender. They're sending out new roots to settle into their new pot or their new environment. Those new roots are very, very tender and get burned by fertilization. And so you want to make sure they get their new roots out so that they can not get burned, but can actually, they're capable of absorbing that fertilization. And look around. The fertilizers for African violets are different from the fertilizer for orchids, are different from the fertilizer for things like philodendrons, and others are different from cacti and succulents. So you look for the kind of fertilizer that's appropriate to the plant you have. And you really are trying to maintain the plant. You're not trying to force it into new growth all the time. The best ones, I was talking about the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. The 1 is nitrogen, the 2 is phosphorus, the 1 is potassium. That's going to encourage flowering plants to flower. If you just have strictly green plants, then you might want to look for one that's a more balanced formula of 1-1-1 or 2-1-1 with a little more nitrogen, because nitrogen is what is going to increase the green growth. All right, diseases. If you've got a nice environment, it's clean, you get rid of the fallen leaves, and you are treating your plants according to what we've just talked about, you're probably not going to get diseases or pests. On the other hand, if you overwater or you don't have good soil conditions, if you haven't repotted it in a couple of years, if you have other kinds of problems in your home, that's going to put the plant in stress. Stressed plants tend to get diseases and pests. So you have to, if you've got good growing conditions, you're probably going to be just fine. Some of the problems, root rot or crown rot or stem rot, that's wet soil or cold temperature, and or, I should say, cold. If it starts to happen, make sure you get rid of the diseased tissue. If, in fact, the plant is really in bad shape and you don't think it's going to survive, but you love the dang thing, take a cutting, take a leaf that's in good condition, and propagate a new plant. That's what we do with, or some of my friends do when they African violets drop a leaf. They just pick it up and quickly find a pot and put some root zone on it and plug it in there, and they get a brand new plant. So if you do have one that's starting to have problems, then take a cutting and create a new one. Leaf spot, it can be caused by anything, fungi, bacteria, and even your growing conditions. If you've got an infected plant, take it away, isolate it, put it in quarantine, if you will. See if you can't possibly get rid of the infection and or the bugs first, and then put it back in with the rest of the plants. But do not leave an infected plant with your healthy ones, because they're going to get it. Insects and mites, I find if I'm not paying attention and I have outdoor plants that I want to bring in and I don't treat them, I bring the bugs right in with me. I can't tell you the number of times I brought in what looks like a perfectly clean, it's an herb, rosemary, because they don't winter over, and I bring it in and I think it's healthy, it looks healthy, and the next thing I know, I get up in the morning and go out and it's covered with web, because the spider mites have gotten to the plant, and out it goes, because it's no good to me. You can, if you do bring in plants, if you can get your hands on a systemic insecticide that's going to put the insecticide into the stems and the roots and the leaves, that's a good way to make sure that you're not bringing bugs in, because the systemic will kill off the diseases and the bugs that might have taken a a joyride into your house or hitchhiked into your house. Insecticidal soats are very good. You've got to catch scale if it's before it gets the hard shell on it, because otherwise those things aren't going to work. You're going to have to syringe it, get some alcohol and wipe off the scale, or by syringing, I mean you take it and you just spray it with water and get the scale off your plant. And that once it's off the plant, it's going to die because you just took away its food source, so there's not a problem. But you do want to get scale before it reaches that. If you have an infected plant like those rosemary I kept bringing in and they'd get just webbed up, you've got to get rid of it. Otherwise, it's going to spread to all of your other plants. All right, new plants. If you think about nurseries and how they grow plants, they've got ideal growing conditions. They know precisely what your geranium needs, or what your chrysanthemum needs, or what your orchid needs. And so they are grown in an ideal situation. Your home, not so much. You may have a lovely home, but it may not be the ideal environment for the plant you've just brought home. And that's okay. It's just you need to give the plant time to adjust to its new home. And so you're going to especially watch out for the light. And also, I've discovered that with water, sometimes you buy a plant and it's dry as bone. Sometimes you buy a plant and you take it out of that lovely container they've got it in, and there's water sitting in the bottom of it. Those are very, very bad conditions. So do yourself a favor, double check the plant before you take it out of the nursery or even the box store or whatever. Make sure that they haven't just overwatered it or underwatered it, because you're going to be disappointed. It may look beautiful in the store, but you're going to get it home and it's probably going to at least not thrive immediately for you because it's not been treated well. The light level, you need to get the plant to accommodate to your lighting conditions. Now, that's within the parameters of what your plant needs. But still, you're going to start pretty much at a high light area, not intense sun streaming through the window on the plant. That's not what I'm talking about, but in a high light level. And then you're going to move it to basically where you ultimately want this plant to be. But you're going to do it in stages so that you can get the plant to get used to the new light levels. And it's probably been under very bright fluorescent lights where it's been growing. And so you want to make sure that it ends up in a place that's good for it based on what the tag tells you. It could take 4 to 8 weeks before you can put it where you really, really want it. Because if you take it out of an optimum condition and then put it in, say, a shady spot in your house, it's not going to be happy. Now is not the time to buy plants. You missed it by about a month or two. Autumn or spring are the best time to buy plants. Summer is not good because it's much too hot. You could end up leaving it in the car on the way home. It could get hit by too much heat, or it could get too cold as you bring it from the store to the car. Plants, and it doesn't matter what kind of plant you're talking about and where you're growing it, they don't like it under 50, they don't like it over 90. In both situations, they're going to go dormant on you. They're not going to do anything. They're just going to sit there and try and hope that you change the environment for them so that they can be happy again. It's better not to take gifts from friends who have very old plants that they want to give to a new home. Somebody gave me an absolutely gorgeous Christmas cactus 2 years ago. Well, it's now on my compost pile. It just never, ever, ever liked it in my house. It didn't want to bloom. It kept dropping its leaves. It hated it. Well, it was a very, very old plant, and it did not like being moved from where it was very, very happy to my home where it just never seemed to like where I put it. So be very careful. Newer plants, younger plants are better to get a hold of. So if you've got a friend who is making new African violets by taking cuttings, and they want to give you one, great, that's a baby. You can grow it up in your own home where it's going to learn to like your environment. It's not going to be used to something the way that the old Christmas cactus was. Be careful when you bring them home from the store. I bought a beautiful, absolutely gorgeous orchid up in the western part of Cleveland. Oh God, it was a beauty. And then we went out to lunch and I forgot that it was in the back seat of my car. And it was summertime and it burned. It literally burned half of the plant. The other half was kind of shaded, luckily. But it was my own darn fault. I mean, I should have known better. I didn't, but I learned. And now I tell you, don't do that. And that's especially in summertime. In winter, you just have to make sure it doesn't get exposed to the cold. Put a bag over it, do something with it. Why do you repot? Well, you can see the name on that picture. That's one of mine. And that poor puppy, I'm going to have to break that pot in order to get it out. I mean, it's a happy plant. It's just not very happy. It's still growing and it's got healthy stuff you can see in the back, the beautiful green leaves coming up there. But I've got to get that split into several plants and repot it. So plants become pot bound, so that's a reason. Soil does become tired. It may start with lots of nutrients. It may start with the best feel to it, but it gets tired, so it needs to be replaced. You also can get it up with salt buildup in the soil, and you need to either flush that regularly or plant it up again. And maybe you've changed the decor in your home and you don't want an orange pot, you want a purple one. Okay, it's time to pot it up again. So there are a lot of reasons for changing the pots. When do you do it? Well, you do it in the springtime, just as it's the beginning active growth, because you want it to start to immediately claim its new home by sending out new roots, new shoots, and the like. However, if it's blooming, forget it. Wait until the blooms are done. You might knock them off for one thing, but on the other hand, you might just shock the plant and you'll lose the flowers anyway. Don't go from a pot to a pot. Go from a pot to about 2 inches bigger maximum. Or don't change it if you just want to give it fresh soil or a different look. Don't even change the size. If it's a very small plant, don't put it into one that's 2 inches bigger. Give it just a little bit more room. Because what's going to happen is the root system is going to see all of this space. Oh, wow. And it's going to just start sending out all sorts of roots to fill up that space. Well, that's not what you want. You want the plant above the ground to be what's flourishing and blooming and the like. And if it's sending out new roots, it can't be sending out new flowers. The plant has just enough energy to do one or the other. Make sure it has a drainage hole. If it doesn't have a drainage hole, you're very, very apt to end up killing it because of root rot. You're going to get fresh, well-moistened potting media. Do not use drainage material. Don't fill the bottom up with those popcorn pieces. Don't put a layer of rocks in there. None of that. You don't need any of that. You don't want any of that. You want the plant to get all of the soil that's in there. And if the roots start growing through that medium, which doesn't have any chance to hold nutrients or anything else, it can't get any food. So you want to have, the pot is going to be filled completely with dirt. I like to cover the hole with something so that the dirt doesn't escape. Old dryer sheets are wonderful for that. I've got a little pot out in my laundry room, and when I take the dryer sheet out, it just goes in there, and then I have a huge supply for whenever I change. Well, number one, I don't use ones that are scented because, well, it's a whole other story that has nothing to do with plants, but I have an aversion to scent. Had something to do with what my kids got into once years ago. At any rate, I don't use the scented ones, but it typically is out of the dryer sheet by the time you finished the cycle. Yeah. The other thing that you can use is, well, you could use old coffee filters because the coffee grounds that would be left, because you're going to shake them off, you can use those, and the coffee grounds will enhance the soil. So you could do that. And I am currently on a quest to get as many coffee grounds as I can, because I've been told if I sprinkle them around my garden, my chippies won't go in. And I never knew that. So I'm collecting coffee grounds, so I end up with empty coffee filters that I can collect and then use in my pots. Chipmunks have absolutely destroyed my vegetable garden this year. Absolutely destroyed it. I ended up getting out of over 18 bean plants, 9 beans. So I'm working on collecting a whole bunch of coffee grounds, because I don't know what it is about coffee grounds, but they don't like to walk on them. That's something, but you can use almost anything that is porous that will allow the water to go through, but won't allow the dirt to go through. And that's what we're after, is something that will, and I don't like putting a rock on that hole, because again, that's filling the bottom part with stuff that's not nutrient rich for the plant. If I went back to that other one where mine was totally pot bound, I have to loosen up the roots if there are any left, because they're all so you want to loosen them up. You want to maintain the soil level. Don't pile it up around the stem. Have the soil level the same level, and allow 1 to 2 inches so you can put water there. Not all plants are the same, so you need to know the requirements: light, water, humidity, and water when they need it, not when it's convenient for you. Repot when needed. Acclimatize your new plant. Fertilize when needed, but enjoy your plants. Those are my my references if you want to check up on any additional information. And the last one, a majority of the information came from the Master Gardener training that I took in 2008. Very research-based information. And I'm sorry, just wanted to point out, site:/edu in your search engine. Whatever you're searching on, use that first. You will be guaranteed to get research-based information. It will only give you information from educational institutions like OSU. Any questions? Well, I appreciate your patience and waiting for me. And feel free to check out I'm going to try and go fast back to About Us. If you do have questions, we'd love to answer them for you. We've got a brand new class of interns, and so we now have well over 40 Master Gardeners in Lake County to serve you. So